What up, what up? Welcome back to the Sneaker History Podcast. My name's Nick Ingval. Today I've got a special guest with me, along with my guy, Robbie Falke, to talk about some stuff that we don't normally get to talk about on this podcast with too much depth of knowledge. But Jay, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem at all. So if you're familiar with Shanghai Soul on social media networks, Jay is the man behind that account and, shares a lot of insight into, I would say like a broad variety of shoes, but like more specifically kind of gives a perspective for people here in the US as to how things are received in China. I know like we had a conversation with one of our other co-hosts who couldn't make tonight, about how you showcase some of the stuff that we think is already sold out here, where you're like, oh, it didn't sell out. It's just sitting on shelves over there. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm super stoked to talk to you. We followed each other for quite a while, and shout out to Keith from our sneaker history community for kind of putting us in touch and making me get in touch with you because I'd been wanting to for a while, but you know how it is with the internet. You just keep going, and then everything kind of keeps moving. So
Hey, no
I'm
worries,
super
man.
stoked
Yeah, I
to talk
totally
with you.
get it. Yeah, thanks for again, he reached out to me too, and he's like, "Yo, I think you'd be a great guest on the podcast," and I'm super curious on what your take is on the sneaker situations going on in Asia versus North America right now. Um, but yeah, it's two totally different worlds. We live on the same planet, but two totally different worlds when it comes to sneakers out here versus what's happening in the States right now.
Yeah. So Robbie is kind of our resident Kobe diehard fan, lifelong Kobe fan. Yeah, broke out some old Kobe gear just to
Nice.
showcase. um, but we've been talking a lot about the Kobe stuff, and we'll get into that. But I wanted to kind of allow you to share who you are, your background, and a little bit about yourself to kind of give people an idea of I think why you're one of the people that a lot of us consider more of an expert in this kind of world, this two worlds that exist.
Yeah. Yeah, my name is Jay. My Instagram is Shanghai Soul. Um, I've been out in Shanghai since 2011 and um, been, buying sneakers since, fourth grade. What was it, like 94? I mentioned on a previous podcast that my first pair that really got me addicted to shoes was the CB94s, Air
Nice.
Max 2s. Um, and it's really interesting because being out here, I mean, I was born in the States, went to school in the States, moved around quite a bit growing up, went back to the States for college and grad school, and then, taught out in Maryland and everything. But sneakers has always been a big passion of mine, more on the basketball aspect, living in the States, and then more of like a Jordan head after moving out to Shanghai back in 2011. But it's interesting because I get to see what's happening in the States. And I'm not talking about like, during the pandemic. I'm just talking about in general
Right.
versus what is happening out in Asia. Because I would say, I would argue that China probably has the second biggest market in terms of sneakers. Um, that probably even trumps Europe at this point. And if we're being honest, it might be a 1B to North America's
Yeah.
1A almost. I wouldn't even say it's too far behind in terms of what we're getting and in terms of allotment and shipment and just even collabs and types of special releases. Like I think you guys know that we get all these crazy Chinese New Year releases. We get all the Singles Day, which is a very China specific holiday. Yeah, so definitely all the sneaker brands out there have China as one of their like, okay, we got to make sure that we take care of the Chinese sneaker market. Um,
Well, there's one and a
that's
half
one of
billion
their top
people.
priorities. Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
feet, a lot of shoes to sell.
Yeah, it's a lot of shoes to sell.
Yeah. It's interesting too because like we've had over the last, I would say, 3 to 4 months. I mean, I guess like backing up my background, being in the sneaker thing for so long, and like I I kind of have a closer affection for a brand like Li-Ning because they were the first brand that gave me the opportunity to like shoot photos courtside when they released the Baron Davis shoe, like 2008 or 2009, whenever that was. And so for me, it was like that was like a cool, like it was such a cool experience to be able to do something that I'd always dreamed of doing through that relationship with the brand. And the brand here in the States has
Hmm.
turned over and changed people probably 5 or 6 times since that happened. But in terms of the employees and the athletes that they work with. But recently, I think we're seeing more. Nightwing does a good job of this, where
Mhm.
he's able to access some of these shoes that they never make it to a you know to like mainstream Footlockers here in the States. But we're also seeing that Footlocker is like finally kind of opening back up to that. I think they did that for the Baron Davis line way back in the day. Um, but as Nike's taken more of the market here, it's it's unfortunate that as they're constrict or they're reducing their distribution here in the States, it's also kind of the other brands aren't filling the the other retailers, I should say, aren't necessarily going and finding more variety. It's like seems like we're just seeing more and more, Nike. And I'm a huge fan of Nike. I think we all are, right? Like it's just the
Right.
nature of the business for us to be fans of Nike. But I look at it and I think like it's unfortunate there's not more competition between the brands, you know. Yeah, Robbie's um, because I think there's a lot of really cool stuff that like I would say, 361, Anta, Li-Ning, those three off the top
Mhm.
are easily at the level or superior to some of the brands that here in the US we look at as the top tier brands. And even in basketball specifically, I think that the Chinese market has been almost more dedicated to the game of basketball than the US market in a lot of ways, right?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
hell yeah. It's
So,
wild. You see here, there's two different. I just brought up footlocker.com. The Ling All City and the Way of Wade 8 are both available in multiple colorways on Footlocker right now. And those are such like techie basketball shoes that really kind of help paint the picture that China's serious about their hoop shoes from a performance, wearing them, enjoying them from a performance standpoint. And that just ties
Yeah.
back into your point. It's really interesting to see that.
so speaking on just let's there's three parts about something that you brought up, Nick, that I think is really interesting. And then if we're just going to focus on Li-Ning, because I would say Li-Ning is might be the leader in terms of basketball sneakers in China. Like I know
Okay.
obviously we have, Anta and Peak, but I would
Peak.
say
Yeah.
Li-Ning is probably the leader. It's like the Nike, right? If you want to compare it. Um,
Right.
so like there, obviously the early adaptations of Li-Ning was not very popular. Like people in the States, they would never be caught wearing a Li-Ning basketball sneaker. They're like, what is this?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I would say it's just hard in general to, especially performance, to kind of break through to be like, hey, we actually have tech that rivals other big companies because no one just thought that that's the thing. It's like, why would I wear this when I could wear Nike Air or React or Boost, right? Like, there's no way
Yep.
that this tech is as good. So early adaptations, I agree. It was hard. And even in China, Li-Ning isn't the number one um, selling basketball brand, right? Like, I mean, when you have Nike and Adidas and Puma and all those other brands and Converse, like, why would you reach for, consumerism is very real here as well, right? Brands make
Hmm.
a difference. Um, and then I think that sort of changed. Like that was the first part, it wasn't very well adopted. And then number two was when they finally signed Wade on. They're like, whoa, we got an athlete in his prime wearing our stuff. It's not like an athlete that's in it for a money grab
Yeah.
and is about to retire, right? It's like it's maybe like the analogy of a European soccer player that goes to the States.
Yep.
That goes to
Yep.
the States for
That's
like the
great.
last
Yeah.
3 years of his career, right?
The
Like
old goalie.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But you know, Wade came early, he signed on early, and I think that that kind of opened people's eyes to, hey, if he's willing to leave Jordan Brand to sign with Li-Ning, that kind of shook it up a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
then since then, obviously, D'Angelo Russell has followed suit, and you know a couple of other stars. But even still, it's like the same thing. Like I think for a while, even Shaq was with like Anta or maybe
Yep.
he was with Peak or something. But it was like at the tail end of his career. Same with Rondo. Like people weren't gonna buy a shoe for a guy who's 38 years old playing playing in his
Yep.
last season in the NBA, right? Like that was not appealing to anyone. So when Wade signed, that was a huge difference. And you know, living here for 10 years, to be honest with you, leaning shoes aren't even that accessible. Weren't that accessible. Not until maybe 2, 3 years ago. Um, Way of Wade shoes you can't find on shelves. They're even limited here, so it's not like oh, you
Wow.
know, it's made in China so people can get easy access to it. It's hard to get Wade shoes here, and they're really expensive. Now, their other generic basketball line, that's a lot easier to get, but the Wades are like they sell out in seconds and minutes. People line up for them, but you just never see them. And
Yeah.
the brick and mortar stores, you just don't even see that many Li-Ning stores. There we have a street in Shanghai that's like called kind of like known as like the footwear street where it's got all the flagship stores. So it's got Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, Puma all next to each other. And it's all the major flagships and they're all like, you know, 3 or 4 stories high, like massive stores. And then 2 blocks down is like a Li-Ning that's like inside of a mall. Like you wouldn't even know that it was there.
So
So it's
Wow.
not marketed to like people walk in. There's not a lot of foot traffic into these places.
are Clay Thompson's shoes with Anta also hard to get, like D Wade's,
Same thing.
or
Yep. Same
really?
thing. Super hard to get. I don't know why they're really hard to attain. Like and they're really expensive too. Um and then I think so I mean in the more recent years, Li-Ning has opened up a lot of bigger stores which are now like lifestyle stores. So it's almost like um, I want to compare it to something in the States that you guys would have, maybe like a House of Hoops,
Okay.
right? Where it's something a little bit more like fancy, a little bit more flashy. It's not just walking in and it's just rows and rows of sneakers. It's you walk in and you see their lifestyle apparel, you see like graffiti design on the walls, you see it's very done up now. Um, so you definitely leaning in general. You never. I've probably seen like 5 Anta stores since I've lived in Shanghai. I'm not even joking. Like
Wow.
there's just not. It's not a culture of buying those kind of sneakers in store. You can get them online, but you just can't get them in store. But Li Ning is definitely trying to break through in terms of just the buyer experience of being able to walk into a store, try on their stuff, take a look at the different models that they carry. Again, though, their Way of Wade line is completely sold out. But I did pick up a pair of Li-Ning basketball shoes. My first pair of Li-Ning basketball shoes that I play in a basketball league, and we got sponsored by Li-Ning, which is kind of nice. Um,
Nice.
and
Okay.
they gave us some jerseys and a pair of shoes, and I have to say they're probably one of the best basketball shoes I've worn in the last like 3 years.
Well, I know Mike
That's
got a pair of the Way of Way 8s. He's another host of the podcast, and they look really cool, man. It's kind of hard to break past that mental barrier of it being a different brand. Like you lived there 10 years and you just got your first pair. So it's like for other people it's probably going to be a little hard. Super interesting though.
Yeah. Do you think that, you know, do you think that that limited supply, you talked about the consumerism. Do you think that that limited supply is intentional in a marketing sense for those products? And like I guess like to make it as general as possible, we can all relate to Supreme, right? Like they just limit the number of products to such an extent. I mean, now they're producing more, but they've built the brand to such a massive, size and audience that everything is going to sell out almost every time. And obviously we've been talking a lot about, even like recently the sneakers app has been getting a lot of negativity in the press. And like I even saw that Nike came out and essentially is going to try to tighten up you know their partnerships with retailers in the coming months to hopefully get more people getting access to the shoes. But to me, it seems like that's just like the natural place that we progress to of like, hey, limited edition products sell out. They drive so much energy. I'm sure for even, brands like Li-Ning, if there's a line outside of the store for the Wades, that's probably the easiest way for people to know that those shoes are available now, because they disappear so quickly off the internet.
Yeah, so Nick, I definitely agree with that. That seems to be the best way to do it, which is make your product famous by only releasing like ten items of it, right? Which but I think it kind of backfires a little bit just because if you're trying to play catch up, it like you need product in people's hands in order to market it, right? Like if only the collectors are and I'm not they're not going for like crazy resales. So it's not like resellers are buying them and then flipping them. It's
Right.
just it's just so limited and they're just hard to get. And if you're already like, fifth or sixth place in the market, like just making it super limited, I think actually hurts you because you want people to wear them. You want people to post them. And if you only released, a full size run and that's it, you'll never get it out there enough. So
Yeah.
I think maybe in this situation it's a little backwards, but I definitely understand because that's how it works nowadays. But it's always been like that for Wade shoes. They've always been super
Yeah.
limited,
Yeah.
right? So
I mean, and I wear a size 13, so they're even impossible for me, to even if I find like once in a while I'll see
you
someone
find one
on
pair.
eBay.
You'll find
Yeah,
one
like
pair.
yeah, exactly. Like once in a while you'll see a pair on eBay, but then, it's I'm not enough of a fan to
Mhm.
pay, 200 $300 for a shoe like that, unless it's something that I have a connection to the
Ooh.
story.
Right.
I would love to have a pair. I would love to be able to compare them to other things that I have and wear them and play in them and all that stuff. But when it's to your point about playing catch up, when you have a lot of good stuff on the market and the market is saturated, we've talked a lot in recent episodes of the podcast. The new Converse stuff, the new Puma stuff, even the New Balance stuff is really
Hmm.
nice on the basketball side. And you know, so here in the States, not only is it accessibility for those brands, just being able to find them or get them in a size, but also to think that I'm going to pay, potentially an extra 40 or 50% more on the price.
Hmm.
It's really hard for me, even as somebody who buys. I try to get every brand so I can have the experience and kind of,
Right.
be able to compare and contrast and share that with my audience. So, I don't know. It's really interesting strategy.
Here's a strategy idea for you. So D Wade just got involved with the Utah Jazz. You see players with the Bobcats, aka Hornets, wearing Jordan stuff, even if they're not a Jordan athlete, because Michael Jordan's a part owner. I wonder if they're going to start bringing in like Way of Wade shoes for like the eighth, ninth, 10th player on the bench, and start getting more players just wearing the shoes. Outside of D'Angelo Russell, I can't think of many other players really repping the brand. So it's like maybe the ownership stake can help put a foothold that's really speculative, but just it's it's going to be hard to want to try a shoe if you're not seeing it, or you're not
Right.
exposed to it. So
I think that's a pretty good idea, actually, Robbie. I think that that would be a great way to market it out there. I have to say though that with Anta and um, the new Anta clay shoes, the Wade shoes, and even some of their generic line shoes, like they're pretty nice. Like the designs are bold, the colors look
Yeah,
good. I don't know if you guys have seen those Gordon Hayward shoes. Those look super fresh. Like they're
yeah,
sleek looking. Like they hit all the right aspects in terms of design and tech now. Because now the tech is catching up. I think before it was both design was low and tech was low, so obviously that's a fail. And then
yeah,
design was up, tech was low. That's not going to satisfy the basketball purist. But now that everything is starting to catch up, like I said, my first pair of Li-Ning shoes, I wore them and I was like, these are amazing. Like they're super comfortable, they're super snug, they're padded in all the right places. Um, and it's funny because now I think they're not like the big companies are now skimping on tech. They're like, oh, we can't add full length zoom. That's too expensive. Like that's too
yep,
expensive. We're just gonna add 4 foot zoom and fine line cushioning in the heel or vice versa. And the companies in China are like, oh no, we have this. We have the tech now, so we're just gonna just throw it all in there, and they
yep.
feel really incredible. So it's funny how it's kind of like switched a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things that came up in a previous episode of our podcast, I kind of threw out the idea of, to Robbie's point about Dwayne Wade getting involved with the Jazz as an owner. I threw out the idea of, having, I think Li-Ning is Jimmy Butler is also wearing
Yeah,
Li-Ning now, right?
yeah.
So like Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade both being from Marquette. How close do you think we are to seeing a brand like Li-Ning come in and sponsor a school here in the U.S.? Because that to me is also another missing piece to the puzzle, right? Like we've all seen the documentaries around how Jordan was an Adidas athlete and
Hmm.
he was kind of lured away by Nike, but then we also all see these athletes who traditionally wore a Nike shoe all through AAU and college, and then end up signing with the brand. Same thing for Adidas. That grooming aspect for players is also, I think, an important piece that a lot of people don't talk about because it's a little bit of a sensitive subject. Just because at least here in the States, are still debating whether college kids should be paid to play basketball and all of that stuff. But
Hmm.
like, I think that you know obviously Li-Ning is all these companies have the money and the ability to step into this to the US in that sense and say we're going to be a big player. But as far as accepting it as the consumer accepts it, I think that now that you have the presence of D Wade and Jimmy Butler and that connection to a school like Marquette, it's being in Chicago, it's a big sneaker market. It also like can play into a lot of that just that story of basketball that's so strong in places like Chicago and obviously New York and LA and stuff here. But
Yeah.
like to me, having those two kind of personal connections to a school might even be another way that they can enter the market in an I guess like non-traditional way. But do you think that's possible or even a thought process potentially for the brands?
So, so this is a perfect segue into what I was going to talk about, which you might have. I mean, I've recorded 2 podcasts and I've talked about this issue that a lot of people in the States have no idea about. But to be honest with you, I think right now, leaning is like, we don't need to do that. I know,
Yeah.
and I know it sounds weird because it's like, wait, don't you want to be like the third, second or third, you know, thought of sneaker company when it comes to athletic performance? But right now, a lot of influencers and athletes in China have left the big companies to go to Li-Ning. And the reason for that is a political issue that they have with Nike.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's going on in the Xinjiang province about the cotton dispute. So Nike came out with a statement about a month ago that said we don't support the use of cotton coming out of this region because of unjust labor issues. And China fired back and said, we don't know what you're talking about. This is not happening. This is not true. You've been using cotton from here for years, and now all of a sudden, because H&M came out and made a statement, a lot of companies followed suit. So like Gap, Zara, Nike, Adidas, Converse, they all came out and kind of said, well, we don't support what's going on here. And China fired back and said, this is not happening. And a lot of the citizens here have actually stopped endorsing those brands.
Hmm.
And so
Interesting.
Nike lost about 50 influencers. Converse lost their biggest three, and they're all jumping onto Li-Ning now. And
Wow.
so it's really crazy. I mean, literally, I follow this one guy. He's got, like a couple million followers, and one day he was posting Converse, and the next day he was posting Li-Ning. So
Yep.
um,
Sounds like me.
there, right now, I think Li-Ning is like, oh, we're in a great spot right now because
Yeah.
we don't need the U.S. market, and we don't need what's happening. We don't need that relationship. Whether that's the right business model, that's up for debate. But it's making a huge shift in terms of ranking of sportswear in China right now. Li-Ning has jumped several spots in the last 3 weeks, even.
Yeah, that's something that I actually so I want to get into like the conversation around Kobe, but that's something that I think is really fascinating too because personally, I just think that the need for brands to be these like massive global entities to be profitable is the wrong approach just from a fundamental standpoint, right? Like
Mhm.
we've gotten to the point in business, especially in the United States, where if a brand isn't constantly growing by 10% every year, it's not successful. And
Mhm.
that mentality has taken it's taken all of the mom and pop stores away. It's taken
Yeah.
all of the opportunity for someone to get involved as a fan of sneakers or streetwear or athletics or whatever that is. And to me, like, part of that is, I understand, like, hey, you've got shareholders and that's who you're, at the end of the day, that's who drives your business because they fund what you do. But I also think that it's really interesting because I've been wondering when this would happen with, say, some of the other brands here in the States that are popular because there's, a brand like New Balance, for instance, not in terms of basketball, but in terms of lifestyle, they've they obviously want to grow, but they've got a very solid, dedicated following for premium materials, made in USA, made in England, some of the made in
Right.
Japan stuff, and like they don't have to do a whole lot. So they're not like Nike where they're increasing the production of you know new shoe styles every single day. Like
Mhm.
you could go to a New Balance site and see that they're only going to upload 3 to 4, maybe 10 pairs in a week, where Nike is uploading 1,000 new products every single day.
Right.
And I've always thought that, like, you know not that I'm in any way against any of these companies being as big as they want to try to be, but like at a certain point, like it's diminishing returns on trying to grow and be something that we've kind of seen that with brands throughout the years. You guys were talking about soccer, and it's kind of I look at like an Adidas or a Puma where they're a recognized brand globally, but they are nothing compared to what they are for the game of soccer or game of
Right.
football in Europe, right? Like that is just such a massive piece of their business that anything else is just not touching. The value for that is like so far down compared to that soccer community and customer base. But I mean, I guess like maybe this is like just a start of something that we're potentially going to see other brands try and and maybe that's kind of been part of the strategy all along for the limiting of products. Because being from Sacramento and in the Bay Area most of my life, it's crazy to me to see someone that's as popular as Clay have, and the fans have very little access, aside from, like the last year or so, him being hurt. I mean, people are diehard Warriors fans. You can't go
Hmm.
anywhere without seeing Warriors stuff, and people walk around wearing Under Armour Curries and that kind of stuff. But I know that the Clay stuff is just not available. It's
Right.
you've got to be really dedicated with your time in order to even get access to a lot of the product from an Anta or a lot of the brands. But that specifically has always been kind of interesting to me. So do you think there's like you know is there anything that would potentially even change that, political stuff aside, the situation that's going on right now aside, prior to all of that, do you think that there's any desire for a Li-Ning to go beyond having this really kind of niche way of weight brand that's popular and be a part of like American basketball?
Um, I don't know. Like it's weird because you would think that I think that they tried it and then it was like, ah, it didn't work. So let's just stick to what's working right, like what's working with us within China. Because like you said, they had leaning shoes in the States way back when, and it kind of flopped, right? So I don't think that they want to go down that road again until maybe they feel comfortable doing it again, right? And I think they're on the path though, to be honest with you, because more and more athletes and recognizable athletes are starting to wear it, and I think that they're just waiting for the right time to re-enter the market. It's the same with And One. If you think about it, like And One
Yeah,
for a while was dominating. They're still around actually. You can still get
yeah,
shoes, but they don't market at all.
yep,
Like they still have Tai Chis. They still come out with retro Tai Chis every once in a while. They still have the blank face t-shirts and stuff like that, but they're not like um, in the public's eye anymore. And for whatever reason, you know maybe it's not the right time, or maybe they're waiting for the right collab. But I think Li-Ning is kind of doing the same thing a little bit, where they've done it once, it didn't work very well, and maybe they did it prematurely at that time, and so they're just waiting for the right time to come back and hit everyone over the head and be like, bang, here we are, we're back, and we're not what you
yeah.
thought we were.
That's a good point because I think too, like the kind of to circle back, like basketball culture has fallen off a lot in the States, in my opinion. And,
Big time. I
we're
agree.
seeing like, And One was one of those brands
Probably
that
from
like, if
2001.
you played basketball, you bought something from And One, whether it was shorts, t-shirts, shoes, socks, like everything And One did meant you were a basketball player, right? You were a hooper if you had And One. But
Yeah.
one of the things that's kind of, interesting now is like we just had a conversation around all of the ALD New Balance kind of storytelling, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, there you go. See, um, Robbie's pull out the N one jersey, but yeah, yeah. But like it's interesting because like now New Balance is recreating a traditional Nike commercial with the for the 550 and having Jason Williams on the commercial. They're embracing basketball as like a lifestyle in like an older generational way, but that's closer to embracing basketball as a lifestyle. And like you know um, the popularity of the game to me is fallen off so much in terms of just like marketing dollars, right? Because we
Yeah.
shifted everything to having Virgil Abloh and Travis
Hmm.
Scott and all these people that are massive influencers and massively popular, but they don't. Basketball is intertwined into their stories maybe, but it's not a core fundamental of the way they market themselves or their products.
Oh, totally, totally. I mentioned earlier, it's like in China too, the influencers move product tenfold compared to the athletes. So
Yeah.
and in the States, it's I mean your athletes. I mean the athletes in the States are the most famous in the world, and yet Travis Scott moves more product than Kyrie. Like it's that's just fact now. And that wasn't the case back in the day, you know. Back in the day, Barkley commercials, Jordan commercials, Vince Carter commercials, Rockin' and One, Marbury commercials, like those were that is what kind of pushed the product back then, but that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. And so kind of to you know shift that conversation into like Kobe and his popularity in China. I think like part of what we talked through with this whole situation of him and or his estate and Vanessa Bryant kind of breaking up with Nike, so to speak. We I personally had the thought of, well, this would be a great opportunity for them to like reposition that contract in a way that, whether you end up re-signing, I've seen lots of theories that it's just a marketing thing. They'll come together and, you know, it'll be off the market for a year or two, and then we'll see them back, and Kobe's being produced
Hmm.
again for under the Nike brand. And I think
Hmm.
like, as a fan, like I could totally get behind that, support it, understand it, you know. But I also think like it's an interesting time because my perception from the States is that he is, quite possibly one of the most popular athletes in China. And I think that, you know, going back kind of to our conversation about the brands and like wanting to be a part of the US, Nike is exactly that with China, right? They want to sell product in China. And if there's if it's not happening now naturally, or if there's things that are causing it to, deteriorate, do you think it's possible that we could even see, like Vanessa Bryant and the Kobe estate partner with a brand like a Li-Ning or an Anta, or any of these kind of peak brands in a way that actually fulfills that kind of, you know that fanatic, that fan base that's waiting for Kobe shoes again?
Um, I definitely think that could have happened if he were still alive, because
Okay.
I think Kobe, and this is obviously this is all speculation. I think um, Kobe, he knows obviously his reputation in China. He is the MJ. Um, he is the MJ to people here, because he's one of the first athletes to come out here, represent, basketball in its purest form. There's stories of him hitting up the parks at like 5 a.m. just to go shoot
Yeah.
with local hoopers and stuff like that. When he came for the Olympics, it was just, you know, you know, especially during the Last Dance when we saw all that footage of MJ in Barcelona and how crazy it was. It's like that for Kobe here. He's a legend. I just posted on my stories the other day. They still run ads of him all the time here.
Wow.
His and they're not like and someone messaged me and was like, "Oh, is that copyrighted, or is that like did they steal that?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. These were all like official websites, big companies that, had licensing with him and stuff like that." So like the food delivery ad is even him like holding like a delivery bag, right? Like it's just yeah, it's funny, but I think he knew how big he was here, and I wouldn't be surprised if he switched over to a Chinese brand, because it's kind of like what happened with Wade. I'm sure
Yeah.
Jordan Brand was not giving Wade full control or control of how he wanted things done.
Yep.
And Li-Ning swooped in and said, "Hey, man, we'll give you whatever you want." Like,
Yep.
whatever you want to do, however many quantities, whatever. You want your own subdivision. And that's what it is now. Way of Wade is the Jordan brand of China. There's no like they have very little leaning logos
Yep.
on it. And people just call them wows because it's WOW, Way of Wade. And so they're just considered Way of Wades now. They're no longer considered Li-Ning. So I would not be surprised in the least if I'm sure people are like, no way, that's impossible. Kobe and Nike go hand in hand and all that stuff. But it's not like Kobe didn't play around in different shoes back in the day. I mean, he was rocking J's, and I would say his very first two Adidas shoes are just as iconic because that's when I was in love with Kobe the most. Actually, was when he got drafted and rocking Crazy Eights and the pair after the Adidas 2000 top tens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those were amazing shoes in my opinion. But I definitely could see it happening. Now I don't know because he's no longer with us whether the Kobe estate is willing to kind of leave the country with that stuff. But I think if Kobe were here, he would have no problem being like, "Hey, I want full control. I want more freedom to do what I want to do, and if that's going to be with an outside company, then so be it."
Yeah. Are there any other athletes that I mean, obviously nobody's going to compare to Kobe, but like, are there any other athletes that you think carry, you know, potentially enough weight in China that could potentially turn into another version? Like we talked a little bit about like the Gordon Haywards, right? But then like, we got pretty excited when we saw that Aaron Gordon shoe, around
Hmm.
Christmas time, and it's interesting because from the American perspective, and here you're seeing it as like, okay, these guys are good, but they're not the top
Right.
tier players, right? And unfortunately, as fans, most of us just gravitate to that top five or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and we don't, especially with sneakers, we don't veer off of that too much. It's pretty rare, unless you have that hometown guy. Like I kind of made the comment a couple months back where like De'Aaron Fox being a Sacramento Kings player and now in a Nike commercial for these new kind of greater than
Yeah.
series,
Yeah,
like
the
it
GT
makes
series.
me interested in the shoe, in a shoe that I probably wouldn't have. I think the tech is really dope and I want to see it, but like having that like actual personal connection and as a fan of him makes me actually want to buy a pair of those shoes. So like, are there any athletes that you can think of that have in any way anything that could potentially grow into that, especially with like I would say the perception of maybe younger players.
Hmm. So I know, if we're talking about younger players, like right now, Converse is the way that they've marketed themselves, is that they're trying to catch the new wave. And it's really funny because the Converse marketing in China is way better than the Converse marketing in the States. They feature Kelly Oubre and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander all the time in their ads. They're always posting their fits. They're always posting like so. It's a very clear path as to who they're trying to market. Like they want these young, kind of stylish players that really care about that want to mix fashion in with basketball and that type of look. So they're definitely going younger.
Yeah.
With it's hard for Li-Ning to try to get any of the athletes because it has to work for them too. Like they don't want, I mean, no offense to your Kings because I love De'Aaron Fox, but it's like they may not even want a De'Aaron Fox. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Yep.
is he really going to push product for us?
Yeah.
Um, and so it has to, and it's hard because I would say the second athlete behind Kobe in terms of popularity is LeBron, and we all know that he's got his lifetime deal, so there's no way he's ever leaving Nike.
Yeah.
Um, and after that, it would be Katie and Kyrie, who are all very signature Nike athletes. Um, Now, whether you think their line is doing very well, that's another question up for debate because I feel like after the KD4s or KD, maybe even KD7s, it's kind of like plateaued a little bit, and maybe with the Kyrie line as well. Um, but I think that it's in the works. They're just waiting for the right guy to kind of come along. And to be honest with you, if a company is like Li-Ning, who's getting more and more reputable, is going to throw the bag at you, now that, like I said earlier, the designs and the tech is catching up, why wouldn't you sign, right? If they're willing to give you
Yep.
more freedom, more design ideas, all the designers that you want to work with, and it all fits in terms of like how they feel on court and all of those things, I don't see why a big time athlete, up and coming athlete, wouldn't want to sign.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Robbie, I was just going to give you a chance if you had any questions
No,
for Jay.
that's all really good insight. I had no idea that the cotton stuff and the Kobe playing at 5 a.m. is a lot of good insight. I would have been very curious. I'm sure you heard Jay about like the Mambasita and Mamba, all of the trademarks that they had filed, the Bryant estate. So I wonder, like, man, like, what if they were gonna have like a whole Mamba line underneath another brand, or maybe to start a whole brand? I think it's one of the more interesting what ifs that will ever be.
I think any of the Chinese brands would have been salivating at the
Oh yeah, throw
opportunity
the
to
bank,
offer him
whatever you
whatever he
want.
wanted, just because just because he's the biggest athlete here. You know, like people adore him and love him here. So I think that would have been a very
Hmm.
tempting offer, in my opinion. And um, you know, just to go back to the cotton issue, it's funny. I just checked my sneakers app today, and it's the first time in 3 weeks that it's been updated.
Wow, that's
So
crazy.
it seems like things are maybe getting better because I was shocked to see a pair of shoes on there. I was not expecting that. The last time a pair of shoes was on there was the end of March.
Wow, that's crazy.
And yeah, like Nike's losing business out here. It's big time. They've lost like they said that during that whole when the controversy first sparked, it was Nike stores lost 50% of their foot traffic.
Yeah, and it's so tough too because once that kind of thing happens, like I
Yeah,
don't
you
I
can't.
think
It's
anywhere,
hard to keep
it's
track.
hard to come back from it.
It's hard to. Yeah, it's hard to. It's kind of hard to like undo that statement, right? Because as a
Yeah,
political, as a company, global company, you kind of have to make it. But if you're trying to make money, it's kind of hard to. Where's the line, right?
yeah, most definitely, man.
If they don't make
That's right.
dollars, they don't make
That's right.
Yeah,
sense, I believe
yeah.
is the saying.
Well, it's been awesome to chat with you, man. I really appreciate the time. I wanted to ask one thing because, like, our kind of motto for sneaker history, since I started, it has been respect the past, share your knowledge, and empower the youth. So now that I found out that you're a teacher, I have to know: do you get to incorporate sneakers into your teaching?
Oh my God. Um, the sneakers are incorporated maybe more than the curriculum, but let's keep that on the DL. Um, No, I mean, so I have
You're the
a
fun
good friend that
teacher.
works at
Okay.
Converse. I also coach the varsity basketball team. So I have a good friend that works at Converse, and for the past 2 years, he's hooked me up and the team with their Pro Evo BB basketball shoes.
Awesome. Yeah,
Oh,
So
that's
the
I
great.
whole
love that shoe.
so if you
I
guys
have
check my
3 pairs of
Instagram,
them.
last Christmas, oh sorry, 2 Christmases ago, I gave them the Grinch colorway of the Pro BBs, and we did like a whole skit with it. It was really funny. And then last year they got a pair. We wore them for our home game. The kids in my classroom, they're in art class. They're like, "Mr. Shuang, we drew you a Jordan, an Air Jordan 1. Can you hang it up in your room?" I'm like, "Yep." So I got like a little shrine in my classroom of like pictures that they've drawn and just little sneaker keychains and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely 100% woven into my life here.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, it's great. I
That's
love it. I
adorable.
love it, man. I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, if is there any other way, that people can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on Twitter. I can't get addicted to another form of social media, so it's just Instagram for me. You can reach me at Shanghai Soul. Um, I like to post pictures of stuff I've picked up, but I also love to post photos of like what's out in stores, and I think that that's one of the biggest things that gets the most DMs and comments and stuff like that because a lot of people are blown away by what is out here right now, and it's pretty fascinating to see the differences in release times, and even more so now because of the cotton issue and because of COVID. But the drastic differences in out now versus what's out in the States, it's pretty eye opening.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for all you for tuning in. Make sure you follow Jay. As he said, like, I think this is one of my favorite accounts because just seeing the disparity and like, it's like mind blowing to even think about the things that you come across that are just like here sitting on the shelf. And, anywhere in the US, people are like, oh, I'm going to go get that and throw it on StockX. So
Yeah, I know.
definitely cool to
That's really
see.
irritating. That's super irritating, actually.
Yep. Yep. So, all right. Well, again, thanks for the time, Jay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Thanks a lot.